Hi. I know you were looking behind me. I too. That serene sound and look from the beach there. But it is quite interesting how you could look around and see the stillness of the water and recognize there's some part of our land that has stillness in it. It's good to have you back here on this broadcast, Dr. Kenneth Niles YouTube broadcast. And I trust that you didn't miss us too much. I know we gave you a few snippets during the months of January and February, and I thought that it was good for you to just keep in touch. But here we are again, and we're in for the long haul again. But it is interesting that we have been having a lot of issues over the latter part of last year, dealing with school violence. And I thought that it would be good of me to help the public in terms of identifying with and working out certain aspects of this issue of violence. So I want to talk about conduct behavior, not from yet the psychological perspective, but more from the social and environmental perspective. We will come down to the issue of the psychological, but it's important for us to define the whole issue of education in school. And I thought it's best to really address why school and what it means for us as a people, as a nation. The issue of education itself implies a specific intellectual development. And it has been so crafted that people see themselves viable and useful resources because there is a level of intellectualism that identifies with needs or identifies with plans that could affect change within any community. And so there is that constant work for higher education, or for education working towards a particular level. We don't realize that education is more than that. The parameters are greater, but yet very simple. We have education from the time we are born. We are being educated. Now, you might say, Dr. Niles, we were babies. Yes, but the babies were educated. How do you think a baby gets to walk or gets to eat, to chew? Because the baby starts off in his first months by sucking. But there is an education that comes that causes that baby to stop sucking breast, then to suck a nipple, and then to suck from a cup. So there is a progression there of the education of that child. Now, you're not realizing the child is being educated, but the child is learning from his environment how to adapt to change within their own psyche, identify with feelings and touch. So after a while, there is not sufficient milk, maybe, or I do not want to have this taste in my mouth, and I cry because there is not sufficient milk. Let's use that example, and I get a bottle. So mommy educates me that there's another means of feeding rather than the breast. And then afterwards, I realized that nipple is not sufficient anymore because I'm not getting enough food from that nipple. And then I get a spoon to my mouth, and then I get a cup to my mouth. education. At the meantime, I'm also expanding in my brain because the brain is being developed, and I'm hearing all sounds and touch from daddy and siblings and family members, hearing voices and learning to adapt to those voices within the environment. It is important for me to really give it its right label, education. Because what's happening here is that the intellectualism is growing. That baby is becoming much more aware of his environment and learning to adapt in terms of how I can then manipulate the environment. Notice my word, manipulate. You could say move around, but manipulate. How do I use a chair, or how do I use a bench, or how do I walk down steps, or how do I get from A to B? In the event I want to move, I cannot move. So what happens is that I am taken by somebody in arms and I put there. And eventually I get enough strength that I crawl there. And then I stop crawling and I am able to raise up and I walk because I'm seeing in my environment the education of being taught by parents. They're not saying how to walk. They're not telling me, get up. No. But I am learning all by myself. I get to know what bread is. I get to know what a shoe is. I get to know things by using them, and my parents are pointing to them. Free education, and I'm free learning. And I'm not being even instructed. I am just learning. But, alas, there comes this particular structure and policy and frame that tells me that my child needs to be in school by the age 2.5 to 3, and we call that kindergarten or early childhood learning. And I'm on to this quest that takes me way into my teenage years and beyond, and as a matter of fact, forever. Because I want to find this new identity as I go along. So at 3 years, I'm pushed into a structure. You know what happens then? Self-learning has stopped. It's now instructional. Relational learning has stopped. It's now instructional. So I shift my child from the natural concepts and precepts of learning and brings that child into a structure which the child is not accustomed to. And the child is going to have problems trying to now to be directed. Don't do, get up, sit, say after me. I never had that before. I just learned to talk. Nobody said to say after me. My mother and father never said that. I just spoke. But now I'm being told what to say, when to say. Why am I sharing this? I want us to see that when we are dealing with the psyche of a school child, there is a foundational concept and context that is missing: self-learning. And that's worked well for you because you didn't have to take your child to the doctor to say, I am missing a part of my child's missing a part of his life. He's slow to speak, or he can't do this. You saw it, and even if there was a disability, there was still a measure of increasing knowledge, even though it may have been slower than. So When we come into kindergarten and we come into that space of primary school, the child can be said to the child that the child is corrupted. The learning patterns have changed so much from 3 years to now that I do not know how to self-learn. If I am not driven and pushed and given these instructions, I do not know how to self-learn. But yet we want common sense. Yet we want thinkers. How are you going to get common sense and thinkers if we are not allowing people to self-learn? We hope for our children, and before they can do something and fail and find a way to do it better, we tell them, don't do that, be careful, stop running, stop jumping, stop writing the wall. Oh my gosh, the amount of stops, but yet we want them to go. So it is important for us to identify these basic psychologies that creates personal identities for our children that are now going to be expressed when that child goes to school and have to face an entire new community with different egos, maybe 1,000, 300, depends on the size of the school, all having different perspectives of learning. And yet our child has to fit into that and grow intellectually. Wow. Pressure. So the child finds a way to learn within a specific environment that accommodates what they want to do as self-learn. So you bring the child, or the child is placed into an environment where there is instructional learning and the child wants to have self-learning. We call that bacchanal. We call that resistance. We call that disobedience. We call that irresponsibility. We have all kinds of words for that. But the child does not set out to be irresponsible. The child does not set out to decide, I want to be resistant. The child just wants to self-learn. So what is that interpreted as? Rude, own way. That's it. I want my own way. I want to have a method that is mine. I want to do things the way I am thinking it through. No. What I want is too much different now. How you add, how you subtract, how you write, how you speak, how you engage. New things, new language, Spanish, French, new chemistry, physics. Oh my gosh, biology. Wow, woo, Jesus, how do we? So the brain can be overloaded very early because the child is not being in a space of self-learning. And instruction is harsh in some cases. There are some children, however, who adapt to instructional learning, and we are very happy because we call them bright. But they may not be very bright because they may be lacking that whole concept of simple interpreting of environment and cultures and feelings out of their traditions that gives you common sense and create thinkers. There's some people who are just eventually growing up to be adults and still need instruction because they don't know how to do it without instruction. So we have protocols and rules and regulations, and it goes on to keep people in a particular sphere. There's some of us who don't need that to live. But then we are said, oh, we're so different and we don't care about people. Oh, wow. So I'm setting up a foundation for us as to where we want to go. Now, when we think of, there's a word that I like, and I really love it a lot, transition. How do we interpret transition from one stage to the other? How do we work that? Because you are transitioning your child, as I said earlier, from self-learning to instructional learning. That's a transition by itself. You are establishing your child further into structures and systems that the child is having problems. Now, let me make you aware of the frustration of a child. The child leaves school and comes home. And what does the child want to do first? PLAY, self-learn. Because the child has been going through instruction all day. The bell rings, the teacher comes, stand, sit, take out, learn, go back, teacher comes. The child wants to self-learn, do what he wants to do. Play, mash up. No! You do your homework yet? Get inside. More instruction. You bathe? Eat? More instruction. So what's happened to you and this child? This child doesn't really want to learn anymore because all the child is hearing is do this, do that. There is no environment that allows the child to develop thought, to develop skills, to find new things and be delighted that I can come into a new sphere, a new space, and do something excitingly. Wow, and here, that was good. We have to come to that place as a child is transitioning in terms of his social, psychosocial development, learning how to work through environment to allow that child to come into a space where they can find self-learning and have people who are called parents to nurture, to bring realities and strengths to those concepts of self-learning. It's so important to allow the child to trust its own self. Do you think a child can? So when the child transitions from one school to the other and have to work with new norms and new principles, it's important to know the child is going to have difficulties. So you find that the child is not going to work along in terms of behavior, in terms of identifying with the differences of peoples, of environment, a bigger classroom, a bigger space, a playing field. Kindergarten didn't have that. Private school has that. And then you go to secondary school, more classroom, more teachers. How do I work that type of identity? What is happening to my self-awareness? Am I able to handle this? I rebel. I do it my own way. So from the very onset, teachers will say, that child is naughty. That child is miserable. That child may be none of the above. That child just wants to express his or herself according to their thought patterns. How are we going to develop these thought patterns if we control them without allowing the natural development of thought and expressions of life that they started with at 0 to, let's say, 3? We have to help them to come into a place not just of self-awareness, but responsibility. You want them to be responsible. You want to take care of. But they can't take care of the way they would love to take care of because they have instructions. They can't find a new method. No, we don't do it so. But it still works if I do it this way. No. And we find that kind of reality, that it is important that we cannot really get people to come into that place of responsibility. One of the things that we are working out here is defining safety and security. And that's why we have to fight. Because parents feel that once there is this disagreement or resistance, the child is not going to be in a safe, secure space. The only safe and secure space is what I create for you. But the child has capacity to do that. It's important to understand that the child does have the necessary tools in his brain to work positively for the future. I want to also encourage you to realize that within our international system, there are what is called rights of child. Now, I'm not sure how to interpret that, because that too will have its own protocols of cultures and traditions, etc., etc. But I think what I want to bring out here is not the international rights of the child laws and acts. It's about the fact that your child has a right to develop within its own self, understanding the need for supervision, which is called parenting or nurturing. How do I acknowledge the child's ability, which I will call the right of the child? The self, the natural ability. How can I acknowledge that when I am constantly comparing it to what is supposed to be a public norm or a national norm? So we need to look at those things. How do I help the child to be affirmed within themselves? How can the child know that what I'm doing is what I identify as something good? Do I get a pat on the back? Am I honored? Am I complimented? Am I commended? Those are important factors in the very basic principles of child rearing that is going to cause your child, by the time he gets to school, whether primary or secondary school, to have a particular norm of behavior that satisfies proper conduct. It's important to have that. And we hope that there's that honesty with parents. And of course, we could, by extension, we will learn about that as we go along, teachers. It's important for us to understand that the people around us need to learn how to accept. And even the child needs to learn how to accept other differences. And I use the word difference because we all have different perspectives of what we're doing and what we're not doing. And how do we really learn to compliment? Some children do not know how to compliment or even commend because they have never had a compliment or a commendation. It's always, you're too stupid. You will never come to nothing. We're doing that. No, do what I say. I is the father here. I is the mother here. But there's a child with a brain. And we have to learn how to fit. How do we establish productivity and performance? You want to have great performance. You want to measure performance with somebody else's rules. When I use yardstick. No, the child can have its own yardstick. And so when we come to assessment, we have things like first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And the child feels that if they don't come first, they're not a child. And if the child comes last, oh my gosh! So if that child goes into primary school and getting last and not being commended and being told you're done, so you're not good, by the time that child gets to secondary school, that is a child who may be displaying violence. So we can be encouraging misconduct and violence and bullying because of how we have not been able to accept the natural development of a child's mind and child's personality. We want performance. We want to boast. That's my child. That's my child. Yes. But you're boasting about what you're doing with your child. You're not boasting about what your child is doing for himself or herself. So we have to come into that space where we are really learning how to create the foundation for higher learning from primary, from let's say kindergarten, early childhood, to primary, to secondary, to tertiary. I tell you, having taught tertiary, it's so different to primary. Because the people, the adults, they call themselves, or people between the ages of 18 up, still have terrible behaviors or misconduct, or have to be sometimes expelled from universities because they have not been allowed to develop that self-confidence and self-awareness, because nobody told them that what they were doing was good. It was always negative. Because we have standards that are not real to us, but are real to a system established from a national perspective. I trust that this foundation, and as we go along for the months to come, we will continue how to work out this conduct. And we're not going to spend the next 5 months doing this, no, but for at least for the next 4 or 6 weeks, we are going to be looking at this and to develop a consciousness of how you can parent your child differently, that child becomes very self-aware and very successful in all of their performances as they grow up. So, I trust Dr. Niles is helping you today, and I will see you next week as you press that play again. 4th, 11th of March. It's always on a Monday, but yet we're going to see you during the week. So long. Remember, it's about nurturing the child, not imposing you on the child. Let the child continue in self-education and self-development. Have a good evening. Have a good morning. Have a good day.